It is just after midnight, the night of December 2nd into December 3rd, 1984, in Bhopal, in central India. A white mist is rolling silently out of a pesticide factory and into the streets and shanties pressed up against its walls. People wake choking. Their eyes burn shut. Their lungs fill with fluid. Thousands stumble into the dark, blind, trampling each other, trying to outrun a cloud they cannot see the edge of. By sunrise, the streets of Bhopal are lined with the dead, people and animals and birds that fell out of the sky. This is the worst industrial disaster in human history. And the part everyone remembers, the leak, was not the disaster. The leak was simply the last link in a chain that had been forged, decision by decision, over years, in boardrooms and budget meetings far from Bhopal. The factory belonged to Union Carbide India Limited. It made a pesticide, part of the optimism of the era, the promise of chemistry feeding a growing nation. To make that pesticide, the plant produced and stored an intermediate chemical called methyl isotianate, MIC. It is one of the most dangerous industrial chemicals ever handled at scale, violently toxic and violently reactive with water. Handled with absolute discipline, it can be managed. The Bhopal plant would not be handled with absolute discipline. And around that plant, over the years, a dense settlement of poor families had grown, right up against the fence, people who had no idea what was stored a few hundred meters from where their children slept. The first link was a design philosophy. Store large quantities of MIC on site, in big tanks, rather than making only what was needed and minimizing how much lethal chemical sat around at any moment. For a continuously running plant, bulk storage is efficient. It smooths production. It made business sense. But it meant that a huge reservoir of one of the deadliest chemicals on Earth sat permanently beside a sleeping city. The size of the eventual catastrophe was set, in part, on the day someone decided how much MIC to keep on hand. The second link was location. The plant sat beside a densely populated area, and over time settlements grew even closer. Zoning that should have kept lethal industry away from homes did not hold. For the company, for the workers who needed jobs nearby, for a city growing fast, this felt like ordinary life. Factories and the people who work in them live close together everywhere. But it meant that any release of gas would not drift over empty fields. It would hit thousands of people instantly, in their homes, in their sleep. The disaster's location and its victims were chosen long before the leak. By the early 1980s, the plant was losing money. The pesticide wasn't selling as hoped, and the response to an unprofitable chemical plant was the response that has caused industrial disasters for 2 centuries: cut costs. Staff were reduced. Experienced operators left and were replaced with fewer, less trained people. Maintenance was deferred. Training was shortened. Safety margins that exist precisely for the worst night were quietly thinned to make the quarter's numbers work. Every cut was defensible in isolation. Together, they meant that on the night something went wrong, there would be too few people, too poorly prepared, to stop it. The margin for human error was being spent, and the bill would come due all at once. This is the link that turned a serious accident into a massacre. The plant had layers of defense designed to catch exactly the kind of runaway reaction that was coming. On the night of the disaster, they were, one after another, not working. The refrigeration system that was supposed to keep the MIC cold, slowing any reaction, had been shut down to save money, its coolant drained for use elsewhere. The vent gas scrubber, meant to neutralize escaping gas, was not in active service. The flare tower, meant to burn off any gas that got past the scrubber, was out of operation for maintenance. Picture the diagram: 4 safety systems, and as the night begins, they read offline, offline, offline. Each had been disabled by a decision someone made to save money or defer work. The backstops were gone, all of them, at the same time. The final link came on the night itself. During maintenance, water entered the MIC storage tank. The exact path the water took is still debated, but water and MIC together is the one combination you must never allow. The reaction ran away. Heat and pressure climbed inside the tank. There were warnings. Workers' eyes began to sting. Pressure gauges moved, but concerns were downplayed and the response was slow, and the alarm to the city outside was minimal, for fear, in part, of causing panic. With refrigeration off, the scrubber down and the flare out, there was nothing left to stop what happened next. The last chance to warn 500,000 sleeping people was lost. Roughly 40 tons of MIC and its reaction products burst out of the tank and into the night air. There was no working system to capture it, neutralize it, or burn it. The gas was heavier than air. It sank, and it rolled, into the streets and the settlements packed against the plant. Official figures put the immediate dead in the thousands. Many independent estimates run far higher, with the death toll over time reaching well into the tens of thousands. More than 500,000 people were exposed. Survivors were left with lifelong damage to their lungs, eyes, and bodies, harm that has passed into later generations. Contamination still lingers at the site decades later. The chairman of the parent company was arrested in India, released on bail, returned to the United States, and was never extradited. He died in 2014 without ever standing trial in India. A 1989 settlement of $470 million was widely condemned as a fraction of what the scale of suffering demanded. Years later, in 2010, an Indian court convicted several local officials on relatively minor charges. The cleanup of the site remains disputed to this day. And again, there is no single monster at the center of this. There is a chain. Store it in bulk. Build it among the poor. Cut the staff. Switch off the safeguards. Downplay the warning. 5 decisions, each one made by someone who could tell themselves it was reasonable, that together removed every defense between a chemical tank and a sleeping city. Cost-cutting builds these chains in chemical plants, but the same human pattern, squeezing more profit from the same structure and ignoring the building when it begs you to stop, can bring down something as ordinary as a shopping mall full of families. 11 years after Bhopal in Seoul, it did exactly that. That's next.